Welcome to the first episode of who knows how many of the Manaburnt podcast. I am Alex, and I write for the blog. We also have Lily here as another host.
Hello.
And we have a couple of guests. Would you like to introduce yourselves and maybe give us your geek credentials? Let's start with Jack.
Sure. Okay, so my name is Jack Greenspon. My geek credentials. I was a writer for Star Trek: The Next Generation. I was a writer for the TV show The New Adventures of Robin Hood. I've written some comic books. I've written some academic work on comic books. I teach at the university about comic books. I'm writing a PhD about comic books. So I do a lot of comic book stuff. I'm also a member of the Science Fiction Writers of America. I guess that's about it as far as my geek cred goes.
Well, that's not insignificant.
No, not at all.
All right, Mike.
Well, feeling slightly overshadowed, put it mildly. My name's Mike. I'm by trade a surfactant chemist, but I've been role-playing for, 45 years, something like that, give or take. And in that time, I played, I'd say, the majority of all the mainstream systems and quite a lot of non-mainstream, and contributed a bit here and there along the years to various publishers. Similar with skirmish wargaming. I'm not interested in big, huge battles, but small, more character-filled events, yes. So I've just sort of peppered my hobby with articles left, right, and centre and the odd book here and there.
Very nice.
Speaking of people then playing themselves, Mike is also one of those people that absolutely knows everybody in the sort of game industry. He has lots of contacts and you've been involved with all sorts of things. Like you did reenactment for how long as well?
A couple of years, then a break, and then returned a few years later, which was the biggest mistake I ever made, because returning to it in, I guess, either my late 20s or early 30s, it suddenly struck me how potentially dangerous it was, which when I was 19, it never really occurred to my thick little skull. I was struck by a massive, overwhelming attack of cowardice, and took up competition fencing instead.
I was a fencer for a little while. What blade did you fight?
I favoured sabre, but most of my competitions were in foil, which I must admit is embarrassing. It's the most boring weapon of all three.
See, yeah, I went epee because anything that has a blood groove, I'm there.
Absolutely in favour. I just like the idea of the sabre. When my first sabre coach said to me, "Try and go for the eyes," you think, yeah, okay.
Nice. I used to try to ride a motorcycle, so I would go around with all my gear bag strapped to my back. So I had swords and stuff hanging out as I'm driving down the road on a motorcycle.
Brilliant.
Well, I remember that fencing coach saying, if you go for the eyes, if you score a point, you get a noise like a knife being dragged across a cheese grater. And if it's really close to the face, it tends to put your opponent off for the next couple of points.
Nice.
Ah, that's so cool.
Very cool.
See, fencing is one of those things I've always loved, but Mike knows I never managed to get into. By the time I kind of decided, I'll give it a go, I kind of thought I was too old.
Nope.
Which.
Yeah, you're never too old. It's actually interesting the number of people who like with geek cred who fenced.
I think it makes sense.
Well, it does. I mean, like science fiction author Robert Silverberg was a competition fencer. Neil Diamond went to university. Neil Diamond, the singer, went to university on a fencing scholarship.
Really?
Yeah.
And Roger Zelazny, the author of the Amber books, he was a fencer as well.
He was a fencer as well. Yeah. I mean, a lot of the science fiction guys were all fencers. Yeah.
Well, I wonder if it has anything to do with what is this thing? That thing you really like, Alex?
HEMA.
Yeah, there you go.
Historical European martial arts. Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
That's something I've been looking to get into at some point. It basically just takes historical fencing manuals from medieval periods and further on, and recreates fencing systems out of that using long swords and sabers, like actual sabers and things like that.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Interesting. A friend of mine used to work at the Royal Armouries in Leeds, and he was somebody through fencing. And one of his first jobs there was to recreate demonstrations for the public from classical
Yep.
Italian fencing manuals.
I've seen one of those. Yeah, they do one every day, I think.
It's probably John's work that you're witnessing. I don't think he's still there, but they're probably still working to John's research.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah.
How amazing!
I think we have one of those clubs here in Southampton, and it's actually run by someone who used to be at the University of Winchester, where Alex and I studied, and the guy actually got into it, I think in his own words, just because I like messing about with weapons, take it as you may, and he started through something else called modern martial arts, so not necessarily fencing itself, but just sort of from the idea I get from this is that it all really comes again from reenactment and people that sort of do this type of things on the side as a hobby, and then there's an actual skill and training there that you can get with these professionals, and then you just go from there on, which just seems fascinating to me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
Right. Well, starting with our amazing conversation on fencing and swords, I think as I pointed out that I'm down in Southampton, I'll also give you guys a sort of logistics of where we are. So I'm based down in Southampton. Alex, tell us where you are right now.
I'm in the middle of nowhere in deepest, darkest Hertfordshire.
Quite literally. He lives in a very, very quaint village that has like one road, a roundabout, and that's it.
I used to live in London, so it's a big change.
What about you, Mike?
I'm in a house on the edge of the Peak District in Derbyshire.
And Jack is calling us from 2 hours ahead.
Yes, I'm in the future. I'm in Kaunas, Lithuania.
And it's super cold over there, I take it.
It's very cold. Yeah, I mean it was felt like -8 today.
Oh, well, that's not too bad.
Not too bad.
Could be worse, I guess.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, apart from their apparently an unknown love for fencing on both sides, one of the reasons why we wanted to get our very important guests today online, Mike and Jack, is because, well, like we were saying earlier, they have very different but very, very cool interests. So maybe if we start with Mike, could you tell us a bit more about this RPG you've been talking about for quite some time, and that sounds completely awesome from what I've seen.
Sure. It's a game called Simba Room, which is, I'm working for an English translation of a Swedish game. Legitimate, it's been reissued over here in English. And the thing that I must admit first hooked me to it was just the artwork, which is incredible.
It looked awesome when you showed me, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would recommend anybody just Google, do a picture search for Simba Room. The artwork, they've done something which I can't think of many RPGs that have done it before. They've used full colour, but they've also used fully painted art throughout from one artist.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, so you get a really coherent vision of what this world looks like. Even to things, well, they've taken concepts that we're all familiar with and comfortable with, like elves. And then you see a painting of their elves, and they are terrifying. Sort of smoothed out faces, almost minimal facial features. Trolls are vast horned beasts that are so powerful they can sing and make the earth move beneath them. And the whole thing has an almost mythic quality, rather than just being a sub-Tolkien rip-off or someone's half-hearted world that never quite feels right.
Yeah. This
actually has, despite all the strangeness and the really, really, I nearly said sort of beautiful but deadly qualities to it, which I think probably is accurate. It feels the world itself is threatening, but it has a certain almost tranquil beauty to it. And then they've just fleshed it out with a history that they are eking out through each release. You find a bit more about something, a bit more about something else. And every little piece I read just makes you think, that makes so much sense with what's gone before. I would never have guessed any of it. The authors, which, to be honest, short of turning around and getting it off the shelf and reading the authors, I'm ashamed to say I can't tell you off the top of my head. But they produce probably the most coherent role-playing game world I've seen since Glorantha, and I can think of no higher no higher
That's a
praise.
really, really, really big statement to make. I mean, not just
It is.
in general, but of course, I mean, the experience that you have with RPGs is years and years. So, for you to make such a statement, that's one of the reasons why I wanted you to talk about this. Jack, I'm not entirely sure what your experience is with RPGs. I know bits and bobs.
Well, I had the first Dungeons and Dragons in the box set.
Classic.
Back in the late 70s. Then I probably stopped playing when I was 17 or 18. It just kind of fell out. I would love to get back into it. It's hard here because I'm in a country where nobody speaks my language, or I don't speak their language, I guess. And the ones that do speak my language, for the most part, are students, and so it's always this weird dynamic of trying to become friendly, or to become friends. Friendly is fine, but to become friends with students is a weird. It's a weird thing, and then so the friends that I do have aren't really into it. But I do. It's funny. I get on Kickstarter a lot, and I buy a ton of RPG games that look interesting that I'm never going to play, but I support them because they look cool.
Yeah,
they really do.
Oh yeah, I definitely do much more reading of new RPG books than I do of playing by far.
I think that goes with the hobby now, doesn't it?
Yeah.
My RPG collection runs to 3 rooms, and there is no way I've played all of them by a long, long way.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a friend who writes for 13th Age.
Oh, nice.
And he plays all the time, and he's always posting about little mini games and mini battles and all stuff. And it's like, God, I wish I lived closer. I'd love to become part of that.
No, but
I mean, these days it is possible to play online.
Yeah.
Roll20 is actually an open tab on my browser. I just never get to it. Having a 2.5-year-old also, tends to put a damper on time.
Yeah, no, Alex and I have a fair amount of experience with. Well, Alex has more experience than I do with Roll20, so that is something that if you ever want to give it a go, more than happy to hook you up there.
Cool.
And I'd be happy if people want to try it. I'd be happy to run, say, a Simba Room taster session for you all.
That would be great.
Ooh,
I think we should definitely do that. But Jack, I think something that you've said, that thing about not just the sort of getting friendly and friends to get to play. I think that's just a general issue within just role-playing groups. Like I found that unless you have long life friends that you've been playing for years, or like a very active community locally, which doesn't happen everywhere, it can be really difficult. I mean, obviously, considering that at least 2 of you live in, well, kind of, I'm not going to say the middle of nowhere, but in a fairly isolated area, it is difficult to get people together. And I mean, particularly from the sounds of what Mike is saying and what I've looked into this system before, something of the Greats of Simba Room requires such a connection with the game and dedication with the game that it almost seems like it's not worth playing if you cannot do it regularly. So of course I understand that there's commitment issues for a lot of players, and so you're not alone in this boat. It happens to us, even though we may have access to the community. Like these days, to get an actual game going, I have to prepare it a month in advance to make sure people are actually gonna turn up.
Sure. Yeah.
I think there's a sort of bit of a double-edged sword. You're right that any really good RPG returns the impact if you play campaign play and really build your characters, build the storyline, build the world. And Simba Room is definitely a game that is aimed down that route. But equally, I mean, a few years ago, after Guy Ritchie did the Man from U.N.C.L.E. movie, which I must admit, I just thought it was some of the greatest fun I'd seen in the cinema for a long while.
Yeah, I like that as well.
Yeah, it was just
good.
Better than the original series. I just grabbed Top Secret SI off the shelf and started running episodes of Man from U.N.C.L.E. for my friends.
Nice.
And the whole idea was we will get together as and when we can. I will run a scenario. with a title that ends in affair, like all the original TV episodes. And we will play for maybe 2 hours, 2.5 hours, something like that, 3 hours tops. And we'll do an episode from start to finish, and there is no campaign. You foil the bad guy of the week, and then we all have a laugh and a coffee, have a bit of review if it's something people would prefer to go differently. And then next time we gather and you play a different episode.
Yeah, I can definitely see the appeal of that because
That's a great way, yeah.
Yeah, at the moment I'm in a over a year long D&D game, but you can't always commit to playing that every week. So it's disappointing when a game that you want to go for long just fizzles out. So you can sort something out that's a bit more set up to be infrequent like that. That's great.
I've had 2 vampire campaigns that ran for quite literally years, and both were ended by sort of personal circumstances of people just not being able to come up or whatever.
Yeah.
And they both died a horrible enforced death.
An untimely death.
Yeah. Well, one of them, it must be probably 10 years ago, died, and I see one of the players regularly, every week. And I bet not more than a fortnight goes by without him saying, have you thought of resurrecting that Leeds campaign? And it's like, yeah, but like we've got one player left. You.
Yeah, it can be disappointing.
And you're playing the lousy clan I didn't even want in the campaign,
No, RPG parties can be difficult and disappointing. But on that note, if I could, if it would be okay, if I pass the floor on to Jack. Jack, can you tell us a bit more about your current endeavors in comic books and your writing? Because I've been following up a few things quite closely, so I am interested and invested. But I would like you to share it with everyone else because I think what you're doing is super cool.
I don't know. What am I doing? Well, I'm writing a PhD dissertation on the propaganda political use of superheroes before and during World War II.
Oh, nice.
Focusing specifically on Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, and Captain America, who pretty much are with the exception of Captain America, who did stop, but the other 3 are the only 3 that have continued from their first appearance straight through. They've never stopped. They've never been out of print. And then Captain America, and Captain America, just because of his current popularity, and he has made that jump. He had this, and he was created specifically to fight Nazis. I mean, that's why he exists. But it was really interesting because I'd never actually looked at the comics before I started doing this. I mean, I just kind of had these assumptions, and it was fascinating to realize that like Batman and Superman never actually fought the Nazis.
Yeah.
I thought Superman did. I thought I got some reprint somewhere where he actually threw a Nazi spy into the blade of a moving propeller.
Well, that's very Indiana Jones.
He may have fought spies. He may have fought, and he certainly may have done that. But he never went overseas. He never fought in actual battles. On the covers of the magazines, they absolutely did.
Right.
But during and this is also during the war. They may have fought. I mean, we may retcon where he goes back in time and does things like that. But in the war itself,
this is a volume I bought of something like the first 10 years of Superman. So we're looking like late 30s into mid 40s.
Yeah. So I think from 38 to 45.
Yeah, but it could well have been a Nazi spy in America. I must have read it 20 years ago. It's still on the shelf somewhere, but I must admit I've not read it in many years.
I mean, there's one where Clark Kent can't join the army. He wants to. He wants to join the army, but he can't because he fails his physical.
Really?
Yeah, and again, brilliant, because they knew that they couldn't do it. The Siegel and Schuster actually did a thing for Look magazine in 1940. So before America ever joined the war, they did a 2-page, set where what would happen if Superman got involved in World War II. And basically, he flew to Germany and grabbed Hitler, flew to Italy and grabbed Mussolini, and then flew them both to The Hague and put them on trial.
Yeah.
And, so it's 2 pages and done.
It's sort of like if God is really omnipotent, then why isn't he stopping bad things happening?
Right,
they
exactly.
do the same thing with Superman.
Exactly, and that's the whole thing. That was the entire reason behind the Red Skull was you can't have Captain America killing Hitler.
Yeah,
Hitler isn't going to die.
I mean, they did it in Glorious Bastards, but
right.
Maybe they didn't want to go that route.
Well, but when the war is happening, you can't.
I suppose, yeah.
Because he's still going to be there, and the 10-year-old reading it is going, well, Captain America has killed Hitler. Why isn't my dad coming home?
Yeah.
And so they invented the Red Skull so that there was somebody that Captain America could beat on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And Captain Marvel would fight Captain Nazi. And so, yeah, they might beat up Hitler from time to time, but he could never be the primary villain. But like, so Superman, the reason he couldn't get in, Clark Kent couldn't join the army because when he went to take his eye test, he used his X-ray vision and was reading the eye chart in the next room.
What? Wow.
And so he failed the eye test. So even though his body was in peak physical test, his eyesight was horrible.
That's amazing.
And so they did a couple of things. They did a couple of weird things, like they sent him as an undercover reporter, they sent him to a military training camp once. And so he got to do a little bit of fighting there. Batman never fought. He fought terrorists on home soil, but never went over, except a couple of times when they went into the future, and they would do these future things. And then you had Wonder Woman did go over and fight mostly in the Pacific, so she fought the Japanese more, and then Captain America was all over it. So,
is there any basis for the Wonder Woman film being set in World War One? Did that come up in the comics at all?
No, because she was invented for World War II. I mean, she shows up in All-Star Comics #8. She's like the backup feature, and it's 1941. So she was always in World War II. And Steve Trevor was certainly part of it. I mean, Steve Trevor is great because all he did, they just gender swapped Superman.
Right.
And Steve Trevor is the Lois Lane figure that's always getting himself into trouble.
Yeah.
And Wonder Woman always has to rescue him. And of course, Steve is in love with Wonder Woman, but his secretary, who is Diana Prince, is in love with him, but he doesn't notice her. It's exactly the same dynamic as the Lois Lane, Clark Kent, Superman. They've just gender swapped it all.
Oh, right. I never noticed that.
Yeah. It's fascinating stuff.
It's this thing about comic books and the wars. It's something that it's always caught my attention, because of my own study. As well, you all kind of know. I think everyone knows at this stage. I study the Vikings. It's not new news anymore. And obviously, the Vikings were utilized during the war by the Nazis to appeal to the Scandinavian countries to join in. And that's the reason why we now have this backlash as to the image that was created for them as, murderous rampagers and whatnot. But it's really interesting how the medium of comic books uses these tools and uses the war as a way of portraying all of these social tensions, or at least I find from my study. But I am biased, so maybe.
Sure. Well, there was the writer, the war writers board, the WWB is Writers War Board, War Writers Board. I don't know. It was literally the propaganda arm, and they would say, "Listen, we need you to do this," because they couldn't come right out and push the propaganda, so they would go to the comic publishers and say, "We need this. We need you to fight the Japanese. We need you to, fight the Nazis. We need you to fight Mussolini. We need you to." And you can see as the war goes on, you can see how the Japanese start to get drawn into these hideous demons, with pointed teeth and the slanty eyes. I mean, they become these really grotesque figures.
Oh God! Yeah.
And I actually find that really interesting because, well, not necessarily currently, but since after the war, obviously Japan has become such a big producer of manga and anime, and they are constantly producing for America in a way that they are, kind of changing Japanese culture in an Americanized way, but at the same time trying to redeem themselves from that sort of demonization that happened, during the period that you're studying. So it's a really weird sort of turn, I find, with.
Absolutely. I mean, it's fascinating that the Japanese were treated so horribly, but then you have characters like Will Eisner had Ebony White, who is this grotesque caricature of a black character with the big lips and the big red lips and the round face, and and yet he's like, nope, that's not racist, but the Japanese ones is. It's like, it really is an interesting time because they really didn't know what they were doing. I mean, the comic form, the superhero form, started in 1938. Superman. The thing that set Superman, one of the things that set Superman apart was, well, nothing about Superman individually was unique, with the exception that he's an alien come to Earth. And because any other space heroes were always Earthmen that went to space. And so for the first time, you actually had an alien come to Earth and be able to look at things from that perspective. And that had never been done. But everything else was just pieces and parts from other things. And it was just that putting them all together into that way set it all in motion. So, and then, once, because you start off with Superman and he's fighting domestic, and he's fighting mobsters, he's fighting corrupt politicians. And as soon as the war, well, even before the war hits, he starts to look at, and they start making up these kind of fascist countries someplace in Europe.
Right.
For him to fight, because and over at Timely, where Captain America was, Martin Goodman, he would use Hitler, but he would change the name to Himmler or Hitler or something, because he was literally afraid that Hitler would sue him.
Okay. I suppose that was a worry earlier on. Yeah.
Sure, but the thing is that all of these guys, Siegel and Schuster, Simon and Kirby, Bob Kane and Bill Finger, and then the publishers, Martin Goodman at Timely, which is Marvel, Harry Donenfeld at what became DC. All of these guys are Jewish. And they're all getting messages, and they're all from Eastern Europe, and they're getting letters from home saying there's some shit going down. And, it's getting scary. And so they said, all right, well, we've got to take the war to them, to the point where with Captain America, the German American Bund, who were a Nazi supportive group in America, were threatening them. And Fiorello LaGuardia, who was mayor of New York City in the late 30s, called up Joe Simon and said, don't worry, I'm a fan. We won't let anything happen to you.
Oh God, yes, I remember reading upon this just in passing. I'm thinking that must be so scary when the local authorities have to come and let hey, it's okay, you can keep on doing your job. We're cool. But yeah, no, it is crazy, and I think that sort of origin of comic books from the point of view of war is actually. I think it was really important for the industry. I think that's actually what's allowed comic books to become what they are nowadays. And actually, on that note, and kind of tying back with Mike and RPGs earlier, I'm just thinking about this game that I started DMing and preparing for, which is Superworld. Some of you may know it. It was originally done by Chaosium, and it's fairly old. I think it's fair to say it's a little bit dated. But if you are, how many superhero RPGs are out there? Probably just as many as comic books. You name it, and there is a system for them. Mike, you probably are more aware than I am, and probably maybe even Jack. But I'm fairly confident there's at least one system for DC, one system for Marvel. Then you have mutants and masterminds. It's
horrible game.
so many maths for no apparent good reason.
Yeah, there have been about 3 official DC games that I can think off the top of my head. I think 3 Marvel games, and then equally lesser publishers have had the odd one here and there. Even Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles had an official RPG at one point.
Wow.
Oh my god.
Jesus.
Apparently, it sells for really big money these days. So if anybody has really big money and desperately wants a copy, just let me know.
Wow.
But there's also been so many independent games like Superworld that say design your own world and play with this. And to be honest, I mean, I must have GM'd maybe a dozen different superhero games over the years. And I've always found, for the most part, the independent ones to be better games. The only one I would actually say of the licensed games that struck me as having anything much to offer was the original DC Heroes game, which was a really clever piece of design, but fell down badly when it came to designing your own characters because it was brain-melting maths and tedious beyond belief with so many clauses and sub-clauses. But if you wanted to just play, say, get out the deck of DC Heroes cards and everybody take a Justice League member and take on Brainiac or whatever, it was so much fun and it felt absolutely right. And it has the world's greatest rules example in there. And the system is you roll 2 10-sided dice and total them. But if you get
straightforward.
Yeah, and if you get doubles, you roll again and total it. So they use this example that if you get lucky enough, you can achieve anything by rolling a really, really high number. Similarly, if you roll 2 ones, you have failed regardless at any point.
Okay.
And they use this fantastic example of Jimmy Olsen arm wrestling with Superman and beating him.
Oh, wow.
Because,
that sounds surreal.
Yeah, because the player playing Superman rolls 2 ones. And they just say, so the GM, thinking quick, says, just as Lois Lane counts 1, 2, 3, go, and the guys start to push, Superman hears a fire truck passing by in lower Metropolis and realizes he better go and see what's happening. And at which point he's so distracted, Jimmy Olsen slams his hand into the desk in the Daily Planet offices and wins.
Oh my god, that's
genius.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, so see, now that would be something that I would grab, like especially if it was like a PDF someplace. I would grab it just to have it.
Be illegal ones somewhere. It was the one published by Mayfair Games. It probably also, to be honest, isn't that expensive to pick up a first edition copy. The second and third editions seem to go for much, much higher amounts. The first had weird glitches, like the Joker being twice as strong as the Batman.
That sounds weird. But you know, now that you mention that, it is. I think this is perhaps one of the main problems I have with superhero RPGs, and I think it's simply because I'm so wrapped up in what superheroes are that I guess it spoils the fun. Like, you know, I mean, I'm sure Jack can probably think of a better example, but if I think of, you know, in terms of pure mathematics and in character creation, what it will take me to do someone as cool as, say, Superman or Batman, you know, it is difficult to put numbers to that. And it also depends with which version of the character you go with. So, you know,
sure.
I can easily see how some versions of the Joker would be able to beat the shit out of Batman and be twice as strong. I mean, you know, compare, I don't know, the Batman of, you know, the Adam West period in comparison to, I don't know, the Joker of Dark Knight. Yeah. That's it. You know, you got it. You're ruined.
The DC RPG had one really nice fudge which worked really well, which you could designate a power as an omni-power. And you bought it as a separate power and said, I've got 6 points of omni-power.
Omni-power?
Green Lantern's a great example that his Green Lantern ring had a certain power which was equal to the wielder's willpower. So with Hal Jordan, I'm nerdy enough to remember, he had willpower of 40, so his ring had 40 points. He can then build anything he wants, but he has to split 40 points across its attributes. So, you know, it could be strength 25, I know, body 5, so somebody did 5 points of damage, it was broke. But also, the ring had an omni power of X points, and the Green Lantern player could just declare Hal had this superpower from the book, because that was Hal using his ring in a brand new way. And you think, and it is exactly the sort of feat that someone like Len Wein, when writing Green Lantern, would say, I'll use my ring to make that wall transparent, which I think he actually did in one episode. And there seems to be no real justification why, other than Len Wein did it in the past. So
come up with new things on the fly.
Yeah. There is, if I might, just a slight diversion on slightly unusual superhero RPGs, if you don't mind me pitching in. I've come across something called Necessary Evil.
I've heard in passing, but I don't know enough about it to comment.
It's a campaign background for the Savage Worlds RPG, which is a generic system, but it actually handles superheroes very, very well. One of the best systems I've played for supers. But the campaign background is this wonderful idea that one day a huge alien battle fleet goes into orbit around Earth, and Earth steels itself to be attacked, and envoys from Battlefleet come down and say, "You've got to help us. Our home planet has been destroyed by this rampaging bunch of aliens, and they've chased us throughout the galaxy and end up here. Can you help us? Because otherwise they're going to murder us all." And then they'll start anew. And the Earth government say, "Well, we have superheroes." And they say, "Great, what can they do? Tell us all about them. We'll try and create a great, wonderful fighting force to fight off the aliens." And Earth thinks this is great. The heroes get together and they discuss what they can do and their weaknesses, so certain people can protect other people, etc., etc., etc. Then they go into space to meet the alien battle fleet that's coming along, and they know exactly what the weaknesses are of the heroes and kill them all, leaving them completely defenseless, because the original alien fleet were in league with the second alien fleet. Wow. And then the aliens go in to rule the Earth. Now, this only leaves one sort of last line of defense: the supervillains that weren't invited. So you play a villain trying to fight back against aliens who are now cracking down on your nefarious schemes as well. Brilliant. And you try to still advance your superhero agendas while also keeping the aliens off your back, and if possible, just pushing things back and back a bit and trying to slowly edge the aliens off your world.
That sounds like a really cool campaign.
It's absolutely fantastic. And the one thing Savage Worlds are very good at doing, they produce a source book with, here are the rules for this campaign. And the second half of the source book is always a sort of 15 to 35 episode campaign. So you've actually got all the adventures laid out for you. And it is such absolute unadulterated fun. I would recommend it wholeheartedly to anyone that's ever read a comic and enjoyed it.
Wow. What's it called?
Necessary Evil.
Okay.
And that works with Savage Worlds, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what I would suggest, if anyone is looking for it, pick up the Explorers edition of Savage Worlds, which is a slightly older edition, but it's still completely compatible, and it's a tiny book for like £7 or £8, and then pick up Necessary Evil for a similar price. And you've got probably 6 months of play there and then.
Yeah, that sounds like good value for money. Well,
yeah, just be worth a read on its own anyway.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely. And they did quite an interesting thing where a couple of years after the original, they produced a second Necessary Evil campaign, which followed the same timeline of the original, but set off on the same day one, but in a different city. So you can get another bunch of villains going in a different city. And if you were ever going to, you actually run the two campaigns side by side.
Nice.
It's gloriously insane.
No, I've been meaning to get my hands on Savage Worlds and Necessary Evil, but again, there is so many out there that is difficult. I'm a bit conscious that time is running, so I think we should probably start considering wrapping things up. And if you allow me, I would actually like to share something absolutely hilarious to do with superheroes, which actually requires Alex's input on this.
Oh no.
You didn't think you were gonna get away without sharing your story, right? And actually, from that on, I think it would be a nice way of wrapping things up if we share Alex's hilarious story, and then if we could get you, Mike, and Jack to kind of contribute with your own personal supers. So the first time I attempted to run Super World, we were going through character creation. It was obviously, very complicated, lots of maths involved, not as many as with Mutants and Masterminds, but still quite draining. And of course, my intention as a DM, I've not been DMing for as long as Mike has, but God, I think at the moment, how old am I? Nearly 28. So I've been DMing for nearly 15, 14 years, which is, still a fair amount. So this was a couple of years back, and I really wanted them to have fun because, I mean, I'm sure everyone that's into superheroes and comic books and RPGs would agree there is nothing cooler than creating your own superhero completely, brand new out of the package. Like if it was
That
sort
is
of
the
like,
biggest appeal.
yeah, like this is the first volume of your hero sort of, idea. So here is me saying, you go guys, you have fun, you do whatever you want. Guess what Alex's wonderful and absolutely hideous, because it doesn't have any other name, idea for a superhero was. I'll let you guess first, and then Alex will give you the actual details.
I'm not going to guess.
Oh, yeah, they can try.
I would even have no idea where to
Nope.
start.
No idea.
Yeah. This is a game where you can make a superhero out of pretty much anything.
Literally anything.
And I'm not much of a comic fan at all. I'm more of into, fantasy RPGs and that sort of thing. But, making your own superhero is fun and all. So I decided to just keep it simple. And his one power was that he could turn into a boulder.
I can't.
Sorry, turn into
a boulder.
Giant boulder.
boulder.
So,
Okay.
do you know, like, with Nintendo, the character Kirby, how he can actually turn into, like a sort of stone material?
Mhm.
Yeah, imagine that.
Yeah. Just
Okay.
that one power.
No,
Well, actually, I think I
and-
gave him a bit of slight super running speed as well. So he could get up to speed, turn into a boulder midair, and destroy it.
Just fly. And
That was the plan.
his backup idea was that if I was not happy with running Boulder Man, which sounded like the greatest superhero of all times, he would instead make Flying Boulder Man by combining the powers of flight and turning into stone. Which
Yeah, so I could fly high, turn into a boulder, and land on my enemies.
and plummet, basically.
That
But-
makes perfect sense.
But the thing is, Lily didn't let me do this, and I did something else, which
I'm
was...
sure you can understand how, from a mechanical point of view, that doesn't work.
Well,
right?
it did work, because our friend Liam did a Fate superhero game, just a one-shot, and I decided to try and bring back Human Boulder Man. And
Well, at least you changed the name.
he was the star of the show. He was the MVP. Because his superpower is so much more versatile than you think it is. He can do extreme damage, he can survive all sorts of punishment, and he's surprisingly stealthy.
You see? How is he surprisingly stealthy? I'm
Does
sorry,
he turn
I'm really
into a
struggling to
boulder in
see
the
this.
middle of nowhere?
Yeah.
No one's going to
Yeah.
suspect it.
Unless your idea of the middle of nowhere is, say, a motorway.
Oh my god.
Oh yeah. But still,
Wow.
yeah, it's a superhero.
Hiding in the Peak District, full marks. Yeah,
But it worked. He was the perfect superhero.
Well, in my
Excellent.
opinion, flying or human or whatever Boulder Man Alex decided to make, it's just not good enough. So I think I would appreciate the opinion of some experts. So Jack, if you had imagine that you were Alex in this original campaign, and I tell you, here you go, use all of your knowledge for comic books and superheroes to make whatever hero you want to be. What would you have done instead?
Oh God.
Literally, the power of the universe.
The power of the universe. I have no idea.
I mean, we've all thought about what superpowers we would like, but
Yeah. I mean, well,
there's
see,
a slight
I'm
different twist on it.
I'm weird because like my favorite character ever is Ghost Riders, the Johnny Blaze Ghost Rider.
Oh.
Nice.
And in fact, I want to write somebody in the Comic Society page just asked for some proposals to write an academic piece on justice and superheroes, and I want to write a piece using the Johnny Blaze Ghost Rider.
Oh, that sounds really cool.
I mean, here's a guy who basically just is given every disadvantage in life, and still goes to fight it. And so for me, it's the power. I mean, this sounds so cheesy, but it's not really about the power. It's about the person.
Yeah.
Damn.
The person rather than the boulder.
But see that's what makes the boulder guy so cool is that he's only the boulder when he needs to be. Otherwise, he's the guy.
Oh, he did kind of excessively use it.
Okay, well,
Sorry, Jack. I'm just wondering, does cool mean something different in Lithuania?
Oh my god. No, I kind of get what Jack is saying, but
I do too, to be fair.
seriously, you would have to have seen the experience to actually understand the pain this caused me.
I can empathise. I really can.
Mike, what
I've had-
about you? Because obviously you also have the insight of having run games for a long time.
Oh,
But, you know,
God.
I think it
Yeah,
warps your opinion of what you would make, because you know the difficulty inside the system and how much of a pain something can be to be workable.
does.
Because this is the other thing. Like, you may be able to think this superhero is cool and this superhero, you know, the maths check out, but actually, when you actually put it to the test,
It destroys the fun.
Yeah. So you know,
Yeah.
maybe that was just my DM. Reactions kicking in. But no, Mike, if you would have had Alex's opportunity, and as I'm sure you've had plenty of times, what would have been your choice instead?
Well, harking back to kind of early 80s, one of my first and most enjoyable superheroes was the soul of a crusader who'd, on the second crusade, gone absolutely berserk, killed many, many innocents, and then died in battle and found his soul in hell.
Oh, wow.
And fast forward to the 20th century, and he's allowed out from hell to try and redeem himself.
Hardcore.
How cheerful.
Yeah, so you've got basically a living demon in 1980s London who is trying to purge London of evil. And he's not the most forgiving of justice givers, to be honest.
I'm kind of envisioning something like the medieval series of Spawn.
To be honest, I read the first issue of that when it's first published and never went back. I mean, this was a guy who was winged, had black magic at its clawed fingertips, and would punish evildoers in a fairly gratuitous Michael Winner kind of way.
Nice.
I like that too.
It's different, yeah.
It's
It's not quite the Boulder, but
No.
But they are much more personable than the Boulder, though. This is the thing.
Could I share one from the Wildcards books? Which,
Yeah.
people. I mean, the Wildcards books are actually inspired by playing Superworld, just to bring things back and try a role-playing group in, I think, New Mexico that had a lot of writers, including Roger Zelazny in the group.
Well, George R. R. Martin was one of the editors.
Yeah.
He was indeed. But one of the characters that they had in their original Superworld campaign was a character called Nova Boy, and he had the most incredibly cool power ever, which I would like anyone to explain it to me if they can. Was he had the power to make the sun go nova once?
uh-huh.
How?
I've always wondered how did he know he could do that?
Just trying to understand how that even works hurts my brain.
Yes.
Like, how did they think that was going to work out?
I don't think they did. I think the humour is evident.
Well,
the other lovely
Just
one was
be very
Dinosaur
threatening
Boy.
with it.
Yeah, touch me and I'll make the sun go nova. Yeah. Then there's a villain that says, "Prove it."
Oh, I've known plenty of players who would take it that far.
Well, have any of you read Zot? Scott McCloud's comic?
Yes.
There's a great moment where Zot, who's this 14-year-old superhero, is from another dimension, and he's flying around, and the bad guy is like, says, I can destroy the world if I just press this button. And Zot's like, that button there. It's like, this button. It's like, okay. And he takes the button away. It's like, as soon as he takes the button away, the guy has no power. It's like, okay, done.
It's the ultimate way of stopping trolls. And actually, as a DM that has worked with a lot of trolls in superhero RPGs, you sometimes have to do that. I think it's a wonderful writing tool. It's like, what? You're trying to abuse your power? I'm afraid not. You know, it's all fun and games until someone, not so much someone gets hurt, but until the entire campaign blows up. Quite literally, I guess, in this case with Novas and buttons that destroy the universe. But I completely appreciate why someone sensible would decide, you know what, this is too much. Let's take it away from you. You're clearly dangerous. Well, I think on that note of, ending the world, Novas and whatnot, we've taken a very cheerful turn, haven't we?
Good note to end on.
Yeah, I think that's all for today. Thank you very much, Mike and Jack. I hope everyone that's listening will join us in thanking you for this first volume of fencing, superheroes, comic books, and RPGs. I mean, what a better
Yeah.
combination! It's epic.
Yeah, good start.
Um,
Good start.
Yeah, thank you very much, you guys, for joining us and for sharing your knowledge with you.
What a
And
blast.
Yeah,
Yeah,
hope you enjoyed this little informal chat of a podcast.
yeah,
Yeah.
and we'll hope to have you back.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Happy to.
Super. Well,
Thanks.
this is us, and we're out.